law similar to the first law of Descartes that's derived in the short treatise, the short physical treatise in the Ethics. And you mentioned quickly that I mean, the short physical treatise is not self-contained, right? There are many principles in there that are supposed to follow from other principles stated earlier in the Ethics. And you mentioned,
actually, no, it's pretty much self-contained.
Well, except that you mentioned Part 128. You said it was
right. He does.
Right, he uses that.
You're right.
Proposition 28 of Part 1, which itself
right.
rests on, propositions 21, 24, 26, and what have you going. And then those guys go all the way back up to the bunch of early axioms and principles. And so here's a picture. I don't know if you would agree with this. So whereas Hobbes thinks of these laws as eternal truths that are grounded in the principle of sufficient reason or something similar, for Spinoza, they're not grounded that way. They are grounded in facts about God. It's just facts about a non-transcendent God. And in that way, you can see them differing.
Interesting idea. What we would need to do is actually go and actually look and figure out how much of the short physical treatise really is grounded in there. And I think we may discover that it's only that one proposition, which corresponds to the proposition in Hobbes that all changes in body are caused by collision with other bodies, which Spinoza might say, well, look, I appeal to Proposition 28, Part 1, but that could be given an independent argument. But I'd have to go back and think of it. My intuition is to say that it really is kind of autonomous, but I may be wrong. But it would be interesting. It would be interesting to see. Okay. I'm not sure.
You remember that Marilyn was asked a question about simplicity and why a simple God didn't create why it shouldn't have been natural to take it that a simple God created simple laws. Yeah. And in brief, what I got of Marilyn's answer was Occam thought God wasn't interested in the natural world. He was interested in this gang of buddies he was going to have, and the natural world is going to serve them. But then in Descartes, we see reading off from the assumed nature of God facts about the natural world. And I just wanted to know, big question, how do you get from here to there?
From where to where? From
Occam to Descartes, right? What made it, and I don't know whether I want a temporal answer or what,
a philosophical answer.
A philosophical answer. I mean, they're so different about whole lots of things, but is it just suddenly you wake up in your Descartes and you just have a totally different way of looking at things, and that's kind of natural when you're not thinking about, I mean, there's nothing in God that echoes, I mean, in Descartes that echoes a lot of the stuff in Occam, but what's happened? Were they just two figures? I don't believe that. They're just two figures with these totally different points of view about God and the world, and there must have been something both culturally, historically, and also philosophically that...
And that's an excellent question. I mean, Marilyn, do you have an idea?
Well, I thought your paper suggested an idea to me, which helped me enormously, because I've always wondered about the immutability argument in Descartes. But what you said was, you quoted the passage where he says, get rid of final causality.
Yes.
Okay. If you get rid of final causality, then you can't figure on the basis of God's intentions and purposes, right, which is what my guys are really think, well, the order of the world is really dominated by those, and what happens in nature is subordinate to that. If you get rid of final causality, then the only thing you've got to go on is the divine nature. Now, in fact, I think it's a terrible argument that he gives, but I've always thought that. But
I agree, actually.
Me too. We all agree on that.
But it seemed to me that might be the clue. I don't know whether you think so. That basically he's ditched final causality, so what has he got to go on?
I think ditching final causality is really, really important. But the other thing that you've got to realize, I think, is that Descartes and Occam are different characters living in different worlds. Occam is not primarily interested in getting a physics out. Descartes really was.
You wrote 4 commentaries on it, Dan. Sorry.
But still, I mean, the way you presented him, his focus was much more theological than Descartes is not doing theology at all. Descartes appeals to God, but the God is not the God of the scriptures, is not
But
the
all
God of theology.
All the stuff about, well, sorry, those 3 laws don't make sense for him at that time, given, in a sense, that, as we would say nowadays, the empirical evidence. I mean, they are backed up by the claims about that this is natural given the nature of God, and extension is the primary essence of body.
Well, historically, how is it? First of all, he was interested in sorting out the physical world, and that was his primary interest. And in a certain way, he is bringing in God, to help him out on that. But the God that he's bringing is not really a theological God. It's not the God of the scriptures, the God of religion, has nothing to do with redemption or salvation or anything at all like that. It's a philosopher's God, as the God of the philosophers, as Pascal was to characterize it later. He didn't start with God and then derive these laws. Historically, I mean, he was playing around with various things in physics. For example, the idea that a body in motion remains in motion is something that, you can find similar things in Galileo. He was working on certain physical problems with Isaac Beckmann, who also had that kind of an idea. That was suggested then from specifically working on figuring out how to solve particular problems. The idea that a body will tend away from, and in particular, I think he was also concerned with reflection in optics, and understanding why it is that a ray of light reflects. The idea that a body will tend to go off of the tangent, that comes from his thinking about light, actually, and thinking about vortices, and thinking about pressure, centrifugal pressure, and stuff like that. Come the end of the 1620s, early 1630s, he's looking to systematize his physics. He's in a way got those principles. And, from his, in certain way, empirical work. And he's putting them together in a systematic way, which he believes means that you've got to ground them in first causes. And that's in a certain way, the Aristotelian scientia heritage that he's working with. And God is, it's an enormously clever move to take this argument, which you can find, the idea of continual recreation, which you can certainly find all the way back. And adapt it to this particular purpose, which is what he did. Not surprising you don't find it in Occam, because Occam is just playing a different game, I think. And part of it is, may well be, the fact that Occam and his compatriots are using final causes and aren't looking for an efficient cause like this. What do you think, Marilyn?
No. It's not that Occam isn't interested in physics.
You need to turn on.
It's not that Occam isn't interested in physics, or that he didn't quarrel with given explanations of various phenomena like projectile motion and so forth. It's rather that they're not trying to invent a new physics. They are trying to work. These guys that I was talking about are trying to work with the physics that Aristotle gave them, and work with problems that arise out of it, and try to solve these problems and so on. So they're still working on the old research program. But I was just thinking when people say to me, well, why did they think that the gods concurrence policies changed, it was at that point that I appealed to the soteriological narrative.